Gumba Malgan, Gumba Nani Gianindu, which is good evening. It's good to see you here in Burragum, which is the language of the community that I grew up on the Darling Downs. I'm Vicky McDonald, State Librarian and CEO, and on behalf of my colleagues, I welcome you to our fourth and final Game Changers event for 2020. I begin by acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their continuing connection to land and as custodians of stories for millennia. Here at State Library, we are inspired by this tradition in our work to share and preserve Queensland's memory for future generations. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our speaker, Gemma Lloyd, co-founder and CEO of Work 180. Our facilitator, Professor Rowena Barrett, Executive Director of Entrepreneurship at QUT Business School. Members of the Library Board of Queensland, the Queensland Library Foundation Council and the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame Governing Committee. Our founding partner, the QUT Business School, and our generous sponsors, Pitcher Partners, Channel 7, Morgans, NAB and RACQ, as well as friends and supporters of the library. The Game Changers series is an initiative of the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame, presented in partnership with QUT Business School. It brings together innovative leaders from business, technology and creative industries who encourage us to think big. The Queensland Library Foundation is a founding partner of the Hall of Fame and works to support our projects and services. If you have the means, please consider donating in support of our work and projects. All donations, $2 or more, are tax deductible and every dollar goes towards our projects. It is wonderful to have your company tonight as we hear from Gemma Lloyd. From her school days in Brisbane to changing the recruitment landscape in Australia and overseas, Gemma knows what it is like to dream big. When she experienced discrimination in the tech industry, she decided to do something about it. So along with her co-founder, Gemma started international jobs network Work 180 to advocate for working women and help change their experience in the workplace. The Work 180 platform connects job seekers with employers who support diversity, inclusion and equality. Every employer in the Work 180 jobs directory is pre-screened to see where they stand on areas such as pay equity, paid parental leave, equal opportunities and flexible working. And in a year like this one, the value of flexible working and the need for equal opportunities is undeniable. I look forward to our game-changing conversation with Gemma tonight, which will include news of her plans for accelerated expansion in the US. This evening's conversation is broadcast across both Facebook Live and our website. I encourage you to ask questions during the broadcast by adding them to the comments field on either platform. Rowena will do her best to get to as many questions as possible. If for some reason you experience connection issues on our website, try heading over to our Facebook page to view the talk there. And if you're sharing your thoughts about tonight's conversation on social media, you can use hashtag QBLHOF. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Vicky, for that introduction to tonight's Game Changers event, and welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight online here. As Vicky has said, the Game Changers series is part of a multifaceted collaboration between the State Library of Queensland and QUT Business School. So I'm Professor Rowena Barrett, I'm Executive Director of QUT Entrepreneurship, and it's my pleasure to be interviewing Gemma Lloyd tonight. Gemma's sitting in Melbourne, and I'm, of course, sitting here in the State Library. And Gemma is a young woman who is changing the world of work for other women. She's changing the way in which women and organisations interact. And so tonight, Gemma and I are going to have a conversation about the work that she's doing and her entrepreneurial journey. And while we have that conversation, can I encourage you to post questions, and we'll try to address them as we go along or at the end of the evening. Use that Twitter hashtag, known colloquially as QBLHOF, Kubelhof. And for those on Facebook Live, add your questions to the comments field. So welcome, Gemma. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Rowena.
So, Gemma, a game changer is someone who approaches business in a way that disrupts the status quo. They challenge the norms and create new ways of doing things. In telling us a little bit about what you have done with Work 180, can you tell us whether you see yourself as a game changer?
Yeah, sure. So at Work 180, our purpose is to empower every woman to choose a workplace where they can thrive. And how we're doing that, as in the introduction said, is we're flipping the traditional job platform model on its head. So instead of just asking women for their CV and their credentials, we ask employers, show us your CV, show us your credentials. Why should women be working for you? And by flipping that 180 degrees and making employers expose what they're doing around equality, diversity and inclusion, we're giving women the choice to actually work for companies that really will treat them properly and care. So I guess in that regard, in terms of kind of flipping that script, I would say that Work 180 is a game-changing organisation.
Absolutely. And so Vicky, in her introduction, mentioned a little bit about the work that you were doing in the tech industry and the fact that you kept running into some rather archaic boys' club environments and cultures that weren't particularly supportive of women. So tell us how Work 180 tries to solve this problem.
Yeah, sure. So we pre-screen employers on their policies and initiatives around supporting women in the workplace. So we look at about 35 criteria, everything from if they support flexible working, paid parental leave, even if they've got domestic family violence policies, if they've got targets to raise women in leadership, as well as employee resource groups. So it's quite extensive, but not only do we screen them on that initial criteria, once employers are on board with us, we actually work very closely with them on an ongoing basis to make sure that they're continuously improving. So it's not just a set and forget. And I'm really proud of the fact that in the last 12 months, even through COVID, 32 of our endorsed employers improved at least one benefit or policy, which actually impacted 280,000 people within their organisation. So it's no company's perfect. And it's not going to change overnight. But what we're really focused on is that continuous improvement and working with employers that genuinely care and genuinely want to get better and better and better.
Yeah. And so what you do is both reward them by enabling good women to be able to apply to them and creating that interaction, but also keep them on their toes.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're always adding in new criteria. So, for example, 12 months ago, we added in if organisations have targets for cultural and linguistic diversity in leadership. And we now have 8 employers on the platform with those targets as well. So whilst it's also about women, it's not just about women, I should say, it's also about women of colour. We also ask if they've got employee resource groups around LGBTI, for example. So it really is our purpose statement about every woman. And by increasing criteria, every kind of 3, 6, 12 months, then we are certainly keeping them on their toes.
Yeah. So tell me, Gemma, why are you the person to solve this problem? What sparked your journey?
So lived experience definitely put a fire in my belly. So I started my career in technology in my early 20s, and straight away I was faced with discrimination in the workplace. So for example, my male peers asking me to go and get their coffees, get them stationery, take their notes, treating me like I was their assistant. I won't go into some of the more inappropriate things that happened in the workplaces I was in, but it was like going back into, something like Mad Men. I just didn't expect it going into the workplace. And then I was lucky enough to get an amazing job with another company where my boss was a woman and my boss's boss was a woman, and it was a software engineering firm. And for the first time, I felt like everyone in that company was truly included and we were thriving. It was a great place to work. I left there essentially because I got offered more money at another workplace, but didn't really think to look at what is the culture of that workplace like, what's the diversity, inclusion policies, etc., and landed myself back in this Mad Men type of environment. And I went to a customer, and the customer actually looked me up and down and said, "Oh, so I guess your company just hires pretty young blondes, do they?" I went back to my manager and said, "This is what's happened. What should I do?" And my manager said to me, "Well, you can't do anything. You'll ruin the relationship." And I thought, and that made me very angry, to be honest. And I thought no one should ever, have to go into work and feel disrespected, feel like, they are treated like less of a person because of their gender or because of the way they look. And then wanted to create a place where women could go and find the companies like that second workplace I was describing, where you can go to work, you can feel comfortable and feel like you belong and be yourself and just do what you're there to do and do your job.
Yeah. So you co-founded Work 180 with Valeria. So tell me, how do you know Valeria? And what is it that both of you bring to this relationship?
I met Valeria at that second company I worked at, the good one that I mentioned, and we both left there and we ended up at different workplaces. And then I came up with this idea, and I remembered Valeria was great at marketing. And so I had this idea, but I didn't know how to get it out there. And I called her and asked her for some marketing advice, essentially. And then she said, I love this so much. Can I do it with you? Valeria's a single mum with a child with a disability, and so she's very passionate about flexible working and things like that, which is where her fire came from. And I said yes, and so we started off kind of acquaintances and then became, we became best friends. But what she brings to the table is her marketing ability, very good with customer service, customer success, and also our partnership model. And then I'm more of the sales and operational side and growth side of the business.
Yeah. So in working with co-founders, at QUT with in QUT Entrepreneurship, we often have students say, how do I find a co-founder? And it's like, well, how do you find any other relationship, that you want to develop and nurture and keep? You actually go out and you talk to people and you do things together, you find out what you each want to achieve and you work together. So how do you and Valeria work out what it is that you want to achieve?
But both Valeria, I think I'm very lucky because I've definitely heard stories out there where co-founders haven't meshed. But with Valeria, we both have a very strong work ethic. We both have very big dreams and big goals, although I will say that I'm probably more on the take the risk side and the more ambitious side maybe. And Valeria, sometimes I convince her to come along, but I'm a salesperson, so that's I do that, and then she comes along the journey. But I think the thing with finding a co-founder is you've both got to be equally as ambitious and passionate. It's extremely difficult. And so if you get someone who isn't going to be willing to roll their sleeves up, roll with the punches and do the hard yards, then it's probably going to end in frustration. So I have a lot of trust in Valeria, and we're very transparent and honest with each other as well. You need to be able to have difficult conversations with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So in founding and running a venture, we know that this can be an incredibly difficult journey and that overnight successes often take 10 years to create. So when did you know that you had something that others wanted? Who was your first customer?
Yeah, so in the very early days, we actually, because we had the chicken and egg situation, so we needed employers on the platform to get women there, but we needed women there to sell to employers. So we actually offered 5 free places for employers to come on board, and we had Lang O'Rourke, which is a construction company. We had Minter Ellison, which is a law firm, and a couple of others. And then once we got those 5 on, we were able to go out and start bringing on our first kind of paid customers. Our first 2 paid customers were Dropbox and Accenture. So I remember when those kind of deals came in, Valeria and I were living off nothing, basically. And I think it was Christmas Eve when Accenture kind of said, yeah, we're going ahead. And we just celebrated because we thought, oh my God, we're going to be able to eat this holidays kind of thing. So yeah, it was very, very, very challenging, I must say. And I worked full time also while starting this before then getting the first couple of customers on to be able to quit. And then it still wasn't enough of a wage really compared to what I was on before, obviously. So I moved into a share house. I rented out my apartment, moved into a share house and sold my car to be able to dive into this 100%.
Yes, so this, just do it, it'll be easy, everyone will just flock to it, has a lot of hard work behind it, and particularly in your case with a double-sided market where, what comes first? What do we have to work on? Well, both things at the same time. That is incredibly challenging.
100%, yeah. For us, it was absolutely 7 days a week, 15-hour days for a good couple of years there. And I still, sorry everyone, every budding entrepreneur, I still don't really have proper holidays now.
Oh dear. Well, I won't say it, but you have been locked inside for the last 100 days
That's
or so.
true.
Yeah, you might need a holiday after this.
I do.
So tell us a little bit about the joy that you get from being a founder and the CEO of your own organisation.
Yes, there's just so many amazing pinch me moments, and everything. I think the biggest thing for Valeria and I is the social impact piece. So when employers are improving, they're changing policies, or we get messages from women saying to us how we've helped them restore confidence, or we've helped them find an employer that's actually treating them properly. Those are the best moments, but there's also other ones. We've raised to date $5.8 million in venture capital. So every time we did a capital raise, that was an exciting moment. I also was invited to 10 Downing Street by Theresa May, then Prime Minister. And that was, when I saw the invitation, I actually thought it was a prank, like a spam email, before I realised it was real. And then I burst into tears and thought, who am I to be sent this invitation? So there's definitely a few imposter syndrome moments, I think.
And so tell us then a little bit about how do you get through those moments?
Having an amazing co-founder.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, it's about, I think when there's difficulty or it's definitely a roller coaster ride. So I think it's all about trying to step out of the moment and have a look at the big picture at the time. Yeah. And also living in the present, because I think, what do they say, 99% of pain is in your imagination. And so I think sometimes, I find myself worrying about things that haven't happened yet. So that's in my head. Stop it. The business is going amazing. Just keep going towards that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we've talked in the past, you said one of your favourite books is Hard Thing About Hard Things. Golly, that's a tongue twister, by Ben Horowitz. And in the book, Ben acknowledges that there's no such thing as a perfect business, and you've actually mentioned that already. And however much planning you undertake, stuff can go wrong. So are you the planner or the go with the flow sort of person?
I am the go with the flow person. However, growing a business, I have needed to shift what I lean more towards and be more of a planner. Because we've got 36 staff and 36 people don't want to go with the flow. You need to have a really solid plan, and obviously to scale properly, you need to have a really good plan. So that's definitely pushed myself, I think, outside of my normal comfort zone. However, I think in those really early days, when it's just a couple of co-founders just hustling, just trying to get it off the ground, you've got to go with the flow, because you've got to be willing to change and improve and learn and twist and turn. It won't go to plan, I assure you.
Yeah, so that in the entrepreneurial world, we talk about anti-fragility and the role of resilience, and that these are really important because it is no bed of roses every day. You've got to get up and you've got to keep going every day because you're building something that no one else has done. So there isn't a rule book that says, there are guidelines around what you should be thinking about, but there's no rules that say this is where you need to be at the end. Mm-hmm. So keeping that purpose in mind is really important.
Absolutely.
And of course, For businesses to survive, and particularly as we've seen over the pandemic, they need to be adaptable and they need to change and move with the times as well. Tell me how the pandemic has affected your business.
Yeah, sure. So when the pandemic first hit, we were extremely worried because obviously we're in the space of employment. Our investors told us, brace for the worst. This is going to hit really hard and you need to have enough runway in your business to last at least 2 years to kind of see the end of what's going to happen. So we did brace for the worst. We expected we were going to lose significant revenue because we're in the employment space. However, the Work 180 team really banded together and supported each other and pushed harder to make sure that we're still driving a lot of revenue. But in addition to that, we saw the employers that we work with actually double down on their inclusion and diversity efforts, because who we work with genuinely care about women, noting that women are the hardest hit during the pandemic as well in terms of job loss and the burden of unpaid care work. But in addition to that, obviously during COVID, there's a big piece around not just your physical health, but your mental health because of lockdowns and such. And inclusion and diversity very much feeds into mental health and well-being. When people feel included, obviously that supports their well-being.
Yeah. And more prosaically, you were on your way to the US in March and you got waylaid in Melbourne. So tell us about the US expansion and the plans you have there and what's happened as a result.
Yeah, sure. So we launched into the UK 2 years ago in 2018, and that's really taken off. So we thought now's the time to launch into the US, obviously pre-pandemic. And so in March, we launched into the US. The pandemic had hit then, and we had a decision to make: do we go there or not? We decided to forge ahead because women, being the hardest hit, realised they needed our platform more than ever. Yeah. So have landed some great companies over there, such as Microsoft, Discover, T Connectivity and such. But the US is a very key market for us. So the sheer size of the US market makes it very, very attractive, particularly for Australian entrepreneurs. We have a little tiny market over here. So it's great to get started, but I think the US and the UK and even, other markets in Asia are the ones that you really want to crack in addition to Australia. So market size, but in addition to that, the need for what Work 180 does. The US is ranking 51st in terms of their gender equality by the World Economic Forum statistics, which is extremely low. They don't even have the basics, such as healthcare and things like that. So the benefits and policies that we're showcasing include things like healthcare, and 401k, which is slightly different to Australia, but also around where the organisations have a focus on racial representation in leadership and the pay gaps from a racial perspective, not just a gender perspective. So we display all of those for the US.
Yeah, okay. So there are some questions coming in, and I just encourage the audience to keep putting those through. Use that Twitter hashtag, hashtag QBLHOF, Kubelhof. But we might move to some questions around gender and leadership. So tomorrow is Global Women's Entrepreneurship Day. And I think we know that every day is actually good for women to become entrepreneurs. But unfortunately, they don't choose that path all that easily, for a range of different reasons. What about you? Have you been affected, or are you conscious of stereotypes around you as a female entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had an experience where I went to pitch to an investor and he asked me to get a hotel room with him during that pitch. Yeah. So, particularly surprising as you're going to talk about an equality business. And I've also been at events with a male colleague and people have assumed that I'm the assistant of the male colleague. I did pitch one venture capital firm when I was raising, and they were kind of firing all these questions at me in the pitch. which, you know, you expect when you're going to raise money. But actually afterwards they called me and said, we want to apologise. You were the only woman-led business that we had that day, and we actually recognised that we asked you harder questions than we had asked the men. So they had recognised their own unconscious bias. But I think, look, yes, it's difficult out there for a woman. We get the same things we do in this world as we do in the workplace. But the main thing is to find investors that have a portfolio that includes a lot of women. So you can go onto their website, you can see how many female founders they've actually invested in. Better yet, get a female founder, a female-led venture capitalist to invest in your business. So one of our investors is Kim Jackson, who's the wife of Scott Farquhar, co-founder of Atlassian, and she's an amazing investor to have. Also networking with other female founders groups and women in startup groups. So building out your network and having a support network there, I think really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And so would there be one piece of advice, do you think, you could give to those emerging future female leaders?
So aside from the advice that I have just mentioned, I think you've just got to keep going. Like, you will get knocked down, as we have over and over and over again. We've got rejected a lot by investors, but, you know, we kept going. We took, you know, some of the quality advice on board when we were growing the business and ignored some other advice that we didn't find so valuable. But the main thing is just keep going at it.
Yeah, okay. And with, you know, we often talk about, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a whole community to support entrepreneurship. And there's lots, as you've mentioned, lots of support organisations, groups and places to find support. Where do you find the most support? Where do you go back to again and again?
So I do have mentors that I have formal mentor relationships with, and I think that's very important. So I meet with them fortnightly, and I've carefully selected them based on their background. So that's one area I get support from. But also I went through the StartMate Accelerator program in January 2018. That was incredible. And I met so many other founders, investors, mentors, and I get a lot of support from that group every time I reach out, or anyone who reaches out in that alumni network. So I highly recommend that accelerator.
Yeah, okay. So there's a question that's come through. You mentioned the idea of imposter syndrome. What do you do to remind yourself that you're not an imposter?
Try to do just that. Just tell myself, you are not an imposter. You are meant to be here. It's definitely easier said than done, but, you know, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because for me, it does make sure that I'm always leveling up, I guess, on my skills and my knowledge by thinking that maybe you're not good enough to be here, then you study really hard to make sure that when you're there, you're performing really well. That's me anyway. But you know, I just try and everybody has it. Everybody has it. So I reckon even Obama had it. So to be fair, so just tell yourself that everybody has it and you are meant to be there. You've earned it.
Yeah. So if we go to leaders, and we know that, you know, successful leaders, they're authentic and they're transparent. So why is it that around gender, leaders and their leadership needs to be transparent? What does it get for an organisation if they are transparent?
Yeah, well, I think that these days it's not just women, but it's also people coming into the workforce are much more selective around where they're choosing to work. And if you are not transparent, the reality is you are just not going to get the best people to come and work for you. Yeah. So if you're not perfect, that's okay, but you need to at least say what you have and then what you're working on developing.
Yeah, absolutely. I asked that question. I thought, that's such a stupid question. It's pretty obvious. you have.
You'd be surprised. Like, how many companies are stuck in the dark ages, and when we first started the company, I remember we were going to speak to a big bank and we said, we want you to put your benefits on publicly at our website. And they said, you are kidding me. We're not being public about that. And now, kind of 5.5 years later, they're on our site. They're public with their benefits, as are 200 other, big employers. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they'll come along.
Yeah. So you have 36 employees and they're spread, they work remotely and they're spread around the country and beyond in the US and the UK. What values do you promote in your business?
So feedback equals growth. We're very big on feedback and two-way feedback as well. So it has to, it's not just about us giving feedback to the team, but also the team giving feedback to the leadership. Yeah. We also have excellence doesn't require a large budget, because we're a startup. Mm-hmm. And so it's been interesting. Sometimes we've hired from kind of big corporates and the first thing they do is, try and expense some really like a $300 Uber ride to an employer where they could have just, got a much easier route. So that's one of our values as well. We've got changing the world requires hardcore work. So it's not about working until you burn out, but we work really, really hard at Work 180. We've got a big challenge on our hands. We're a small team. We're across 3 countries. And yes, we're very flexible in how we work and we work remotely, but we work hard. And so I think it's important that we also, people coming into the business also know those types of values as well. But I think the other things are around, empathy and kindness. So we work hard, we give feedback, but we are very kind and we don't like brilliant jerks or put up with brilliant jerks, I guess they say. So super smart people that are kind of rude to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So you will have also had to develop your own leadership capacity. Can you tell us perhaps a personal story that might evidence the way in which you lead?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a journey for me being a leader over the last 5.5 years, and I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. So the way that I lead is definitely lead by example and very kind of hands-on. So I will never ask my team to do anything that I wouldn't do. And if it's a case of something needs to be done, I will always be the one to stay back on the weekend rather than make them stay back on the weekend. Because I'm the founder and I'm happy to work until, I'm exhausted, but it's not okay to make other people do that to that extent. So I would rather jump in the trenches before they do. But also I think one of the things that I think I've gotten a lot better at is really kind of building good personal relationships with my team members as well, because, I might sound quite confident, but I'm actually very introverted. And being an introverted leader can be potentially mistaken for you're not interested in them because you're actually too shy to make conversations, which I know might sound surprising, but that's, a fact about me. So when I now meet people, I have to put all of that aside. And I really, I do care. And I now am much better at showing that I care by building personal relationships with the team. And also by building personal relationships, it makes it much easier to actually give feedback and also making it comfortable for them to give feedback to us. But I think one of the mistakes that we've kind of made in the past is that we've kind of trusted leaders to follow our values, and they haven't necessarily done that. And so we've had a team in the past, or maybe even 2, that have been quite kind of overworked because the leader, just kind of delegated all the work over to the team and didn't follow those values where the leader should have done it before before the team. And only when that leader left did we actually really find that out. And so one of the things that we make sure that we do now is we talk to every level of the team, my co-founder and I. We catch up with people randomly and make sure we're getting feedback, obviously engagement surveys and pulse surveys and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been acknowledged as a finalist in the Telstra Business Awards, and you've won an award as well with through Women in Technology. So how do you measure success for yourself?
That's a great question. So, I'm very target and numbers focused. So I'm always looking at, are we hitting the number? That's one way I measure success. Also on the feedback that we get from the company and making sure our team and our people are happy and they're thriving. But, it's an interesting question because, to be honest, I don't really think about my own success. I think about Work 180's success, which I guess is me, but I'm not Gemma Lloyd anymore. I'm Work 180 and that's all I think about.
So do you measure success in the business through perhaps the funding that you've received or the numbers of customers, or is it the number of women on the platform? What are the measures for the business?
Yeah, so the measures for the business are monthly recurring revenue, so a subscription base. We get revenue from employers, and then number of women obviously using the platform as well, and then social impact, so the policies and the change that we're driving.
Okay. Yeah. So thinking about COVID, which unfortunately we have to keep doing that every so often, we know that it has had a terrible effect on women in the workforce, and as a result the gender pay gap is widening again. I think it's sitting back at about 17%. So the evidence is pretty clear that they've been affected pretty badly by the economic changes wrought by COVID. So how do we address this issue? What do we do to support women?
Yeah, well, I think where the government's investing their money, they could have given a lot more to women's industries, such as childcare, healthcare, etc., rather than construction is obviously very important to be investing in, but the reality is that construction is very, very heavily male dominated, and so you're missing out on a lot on supporting women there. But also employers being more flexible, which, to be fair, COVID, if there's one good thing that's come out of COVID, it is that they have kind of opened their eyes and had no choice but to be flexible. But it's about supporting men to be flexible as well, because at the moment the burden of unpaid care work is largely on women, and that's because women often get the paid parental leave, they get the flexible working, but men don't. And then so when a man has to be in the office or working, those really long hours, women have no choice but to take the flexibility and look after children. So if we can actually balance that out more in the workplace, then we should get more balance at home and at work.
And do you think there are that you are able to change the opinions of employers and make more fields of work inclusive? So tell us about, you've got some construction organisations on the site. So what have you seen them do since they came to you and worked with you? How has that changed?
Well, Lang O'Rourke is a really great example of a construction company that's doing some amazing things. So, for example, they have an outstanding paid parental leave policy. They offer 26 weeks in paid parental leave, which is very, very significant. So they want women to be attracted to the organisation. They want women to be able to have children in return. They also are very focused on flexible working, as I've already mentioned. But to attract more women into the industry, it's about having the right benefits, but then you've also got to showcase how those benefits actually come to life and tell these stories of real women actually working at the company. So we do a lot of interviews at organisations and sharing how how they're thriving. And then that serves as inspiration for younger women, looking at what industries they should choose, but also women who may be at organisations who aren't as supportive. They can see, hey, that company's people are really happy there. I should be applying to them as well. So there's also, I mentioned domestic and family violence. So a lot of the organisations which are heavily male dominated have great domestic family violence policies which go above and beyond the government legislation, because they also recognise that, if 1 in 3 women are victims, 1 in 3 men are perpetrators. And if they've got a majority male workforce, the chances are a lot of the people in their workforce are male. So the education piece, but also I've seen some employers actually have rehabilitation programs for men in the company who have been perpetrators. So they've taken it actually one step further as well.
Yeah, okay. And thinking about being in the US and the UK, what about the differences you see between workplaces, between Australia, the US and the UK? Do you see quite considerable differences in their approach to women and the support that they provide for women?
It's interesting because it's fairly kind of similar, but some regions do some things better than others. And where they're lacking in one place, somewhere else is doing something better. But the great thing is about having the presence across Australia, the UK and the US is we're taking what each region is doing really well and then bringing that overseas. And so, for example, Australia was actually really at the forefront of domestic and family violence policies. We brought that over to the UK, and now we've got a number of UK employers that have implemented the DFE policies. Over in the UK, they were very focused on menopause support for women in the workplace. We've brought that over to Australia, and we've done large campaigns around that piece, which was something that I certainly really hadn't come across very often here. So having that global lens, it just means that we can bring every region up together quicker, I think.
Yeah. And then the other thing, of course, that we often talk about is the role of women on boards. And, you work with some big corporates. What's your opinion about the way in which boards should be constituted? Clearly, there's not enough women on boards. We know that. But should we be mandating more women to equalise that, or just waiting for stuff to change?
Yeah, so controversial, but I'm sorry, everyone, I do believe in quotas. So, especially for board positions. So it doesn't necessarily need to be 50-50. It can be 40-40-20. I think Senator Penny Wong was the person that said, that 40-40-20 is a really good balance. But anywhere where key decisions are being made, there needs to be a balance of women and men that represent the community, whether it be boards, whether it be in government, any level of an organisation.
Yeah. And you will, of course, seen the controversy in Parliament as a workplace just recently that unfortunately has been on show to the world. What should we be doing about making sure that those sorts of workplaces are also fair and equitable?
I can't even believe it. I just don't know. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to Australia. So, and I think the impact of not having that balance in government is quite profound. So if you look at countries like Iceland, for example, or any of those Nordic regions, they do have really good balance, and therefore that permeates across the country as a whole. So they've got legislation such as in Iceland that men need to take up equal amounts of paid parental leave as women. Yeah. And therefore it reduces that kind of notion of hyper-masculinity when it's only women looking after the kids, men going out to work. Everybody's equal at home, therefore everybody's equal at work, and therefore they've got the lowest gender gap in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, it was a question with a very easy answer. there's a lot more that can be done, but yes, we shouldn't have to be talking about it. Tell us a little bit, because you've got we've got lots of Queenslanders who are on the call tonight. Tell us a little bit about your connection to Queensland. And, you know, we all know it's the best place in the world to be, even though you're in Melbourne at the moment. But what are your links to Queensland and your experience as an entrepreneur when you've been in Queensland?
Yeah, so I went to Cannon Hill Anglican College, and I started my company whilst being based in Queensland. And I was there for a couple of years before, you know, traveling to various places to grow the company. But we've got about half of our Australian workforce based in Brisbane as well. So I think Brisbane is a great place to hire for a few reasons. If you want to get office space, it's typically more cost effective than Sydney or Melbourne, for example. We found it actually easier to get really great people to come and work for us in Brisbane. Maybe it's slightly less competitive that we found than some of those other states, but yeah, so I love Queensland and obviously wish I was there when COVID hit.
And of course, we've noted earlier the colour of your shirt tonight, which
yes, you know, the maroons.
Yeah, some sort of game on tonight. So, when you were at Cannon Hill Anglican School, did you think that this would be your career, that you would start a successful global business, that this was on your horizon?
No, definitely not. I was good at science at school, so I thought I would go into health science. But I, you know, got the travel bug, as I guess a lot of people do when they leave school, and went travelling, and then my eyes were opened, I guess, to other types of career paths. But I certainly wish I had known more about being an entrepreneur, or even about technology, innovation and technology. I never would have considered a career in tech. You know, back then, I think, and I graduated in 2005. But it may still be the case today that, you know, you kind of think about technology as the nerdy guy in the hoodie in a dark room kind of gaming away on their own. But it's not. It's, you know, it's an amazing industry that, yeah, I wish my school had kind of taught us a little bit more in that space.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's certainly lots of new emerging programs for women in STEM, because we know that certainly young women are turned off at a really early age, and we want to keep that passion, you know, flying, and you know, people choosing STEM, because there are so many opportunities that can be created. And as you say, technology. Without technology, how do you scale and grow your venture?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, you can't.
No, you can't. You are still Gemma Lloyd, and you can't be in all places at the same time. So there are still some more questions coming in, but before we get to them, just can we have a little peek into your future? What's on the horizon for you while you're running this venture? Do you think about what comes next?
What comes after the venture?
Yeah.
Well, right now I'm obviously focused on the US market, which is our highest priority. And so in the next 3 years, we have big plans and, you know, want to more than 10x our current monthly recurring revenue, with the US being the primary focus. But beyond that, you know, we're already getting inquiries from companies in other European countries, in Asia, Singapore. We get a lot of inquiries from and such. So there's a big opportunity for Work 180 outside of the markets that we're currently in. But beyond Work 180, I really want to be an investor.
Okay.
Because I love startups. I love hearing what other people are doing, and I think being part of the StartMate Accelerator program, it exposed me to lots of other people doing really, really cool things. And so to be part of that ecosystem, you know, on the other side of the fence is an exciting prospect, but not for a long time.
Yeah. Yes. So that expansion into the US, will that see you move to the US at some point?
I think so, yeah. Post all of, this stage that we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
The US is, as I mentioned earlier, a very critical market because of the sheer size of it. And I think that being on the ground there is going to set us up for success in that region.
Yeah. And where would you choose a location? Where would you choose to be located in the US?
Oh, it's a good question because, typically you would say San Francisco or maybe New York. However, I think in the US, there's a lot of places popping up in other areas. So Austin, Texas, for example, I know that a lot of startups are moving there. So, I think you've kind of got to weigh up cost versus, but I'd say maybe New York will probably be at the top of the list purely because there's lots of financial institutions there as well as technology companies which are very focused on inclusion and diversity. And I think the state and the city is more progressive, and given we're in the equality space, we do want to be somewhere more progressive, but we'll just have to see because, maybe it'll be Austin.
Yep. All sorts of different places. So there's a question here from Richard about what do you think we can do to encourage more young women into technology? What are the stories that we need to tell?
Yeah, so it starts from a young age. So Work 180, we actually run an initiative called Super Daughter Day every year, which is to get primary school age girls interested in coding and robotics. And last year we had over 3,000 participants in that in Australia, and we also run it now in the UK as well, which is really exciting. So starting from a young age, and we also bring the parents along as well so that they can influence their children. So I think there's that, and then it's just, as children get older, exposing role models and, sharing stories that is not necessarily just about being very technical or being coding. There are lots of opportunities in the tech sector that don't necessarily involve something really mathematical. But it's an education piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another question here as well around your business in particular and what you might pinpoint as key to success. Is it because it's a tech firm? Is it because of the niche in which it operates? What do you think it is? Is it the culture of the organisation?
I think it's our purpose and the niche in which we operate, but I think it's how we go about fulfilling our purpose. So we're not just a job platform with a woman-friendly badge on it. We are very serious about what we do. We do the pre-screening. We work with employers. So I think the whole business model is good, but obviously I'm biased. But I think it's fair to say, given our growth and our customer base, others agree too. So there's that piece. But second to that is the technology, and also the people that you hire are absolutely critical to your business. You have got to hire good people. I think when you're mission based and you have a strong purpose, you get a lot of people, apply, super passionate about the organisation, but they might not necessarily be kind of right for the role or the right fit for the company. And so you've got to make sure that you're kind of really asking hard questions, so you're not just hiring on passion, that you're also hiring for the right person for the role, and setting the expectations of what it's like to work in a startup, because every person in the early days almost has to be a bit of a jack of all trades and roll their sleeves up and be kind of willing to do anything.
Yeah, that's right. And so, you've talked about StartMate and the role that played, the accelerator program. So those networks that you've created, how have you utilised them to grow the business? Clearly, that enabled part of the investment as well, or connected you to the investment. But how, in other ways, how has that network helped you to grow the business?
Yeah, definitely. So introductions to customers, speaking opportunities, advice on our product and our technology or our go-to-market strategy, when I have spoken with investors in the past, I have always asked them for feedback. What red flags do you see about the business? And then, they'll tell you, well, I'm worried about this piece. So then you can explore that particular piece further and make sure you're doubling down on whatever needs to be done there. So, I think, just being just always asking what people think and taking their advice, asking for introductions as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes. Can you offer us any parting advice for those emerging leaders and young entrepreneurs that might be out there in the audience?
Yeah, I think you building out your network and getting good advice is the best thing that you can do. People have done whatever you're trying to do in some regard before, or a piece of what you're trying to do. So you don't want to sit there and try and work it out all on your own. If you can actually network, get advice, then you're going to get there a lot quicker. I think sometimes I've mulled over things for far too long instead of actually reaching out for help from others.
Yeah. Yes, it's not only offering to help, but it's also asking for help that can make a difference. Yes.
Absolutely.
So we have to wrap up now. So can you all join me in thanking Gemma for her insights and her candid conversation tonight, answering the questions that we have there. We all wish Gemma incredibly well in the future, and that, continuing to grow and expand the venture. So thank you, Gemma, and good luck with what comes next. On behalf of the State Library of Queensland and the QUT Business School, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors of the Business Leaders Hall of Fame. The principal sponsors are Pitcher Partners, the television sponsor is Channel 7, the major sponsors are Morgans, NAB and RACQ, and we're all very grateful for the ongoing support and commitment to this program. This is, as I say, a collaboration between the State Library of Queensland and the QUT Business School. So tonight was the last Game Changers event for 2020, but stay tuned for announcements about the 2021 Game Changers program via the State Library website. We wish you all an incredibly happy holiday season and look forward to seeing you back for Game Changers next year. Thank you all.